Hello, and welcome back to the Film Brain podcast. And on this episode, I think you can probably guess what this is about. It's about Zack Snyder's Justice League. And I promise you, this discussion won't be 4 hours long.
Don't tempt me.
But while plenty of people have managed to endure the quite long running time, I've brought 3 other people with me, my own little Justice League, if you will. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
Hello everyone, I'm Oliver Harper.
I'm Jonathan Burdett.
And I'm Lasse Vogt. How's it going?
It's going great. It's going a little bit better because now I've seen both versions of Justice League and that's 6 hours down in my time.
But it's done.
Yeah.
It's over with.
Right, so I guess, as usual for the podcast, I should do a plot synopsis, but it almost feels kind of redundant here because if you've seen the previous cut of Justice League, it's the exact same plot, in that following the events of Batman v Superman, Superman has died, and now Bruce Wayne, played by Ben Affleck, has to band together the members of the Justice League, including Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman, Jason Momoa's Aquaman, Ezra Miller's Flash, and Ray Fisher's Cyborg, to face the threat of Steppenwolf, who is desperate to reclaim the mother boxes to potentially take over the world and bring about Darkseid. So, this is the awkward bit. I don't think I would normally have to say this, especially given that a lot of people who listen to my podcast already know my work, but obviously this is not meant to be an attack on Zack Snyder in any way. Obviously the circumstances of Justice League's production are tied to the tragedy that Zack endured. I want to make clear that when we talk about this film, it's professional, it's not personal. Honestly, on a personal level, I can't imagine what Zack has gone through, to be honest. If you've ever experienced that for yourself, you know how much it hurts, and if you haven't, you can't possibly imagine it. I know that I've been outspoken about Zack's work in the past, but that's his work. As a person, I have no problem with him whatsoever. This is purely about discussing the merits of his work. I feel like that's already clear, but just to make absolutely positively clear, I'm putting that up front. So obviously, as we know, Justice League had a very tempestuous production, to say the least, not least of which because of the fact that Batman v Superman underperformed at the box office, which gave Warner Brothers a lot of cold feet as they started the shoot of Justice League just 2 weeks after that film came out. And certainly, even building up to Snyder's departure, there was definitely rumours that there was interference beforehand, and then of course, once Snyder left the project in those circumstances, Joss Whedon took over to ostensibly complete the movie, but then it turns out that Whedon's contributions were far more substantial than that. The release version of the film got, at best, mixed responses and still underperformed at the box office, but since its release there has been a considerable amount of fan interest in the Snyder cut, and I think that the fans kind of got a bit carried away with this, to say the least. I think the disappointment with the film manifested in this weird, well, the Snyder version is this some kind of holy grail that turns it into a perfect movie, and there was lots of us going, well, if there is a Snyder cut, and there probably was, it wasn't in any releasable state, and certainly that was the case for a long time up until HBO Max essentially contacted Snyder and gave him the $70 million to complete his cut. Apparently, when they first offered it to Snyder, they literally just said, hey, do you want to release the rough cut? I can't imagine what that would be like. That would be 4 hours of green screen. So Snyder's finally completed it. Again, talking about the sort of fan response, I know that there was a lot of positive elements of the community that wanted the Snyder cut. Certainly there was a lot of people that were interested in it just as a matter of seeing what Snyder's original vision was, or just an interest in alternate cuts. I wasn't the biggest fan of Batman v Superman, but I was interested to see what Snyder's original take on it was. And I remember, Oliver, at the time when Justice League came out, we were actually discussing this. We were discussing the possibility of whether there would actually be a Snyder cut, because obviously very similar situation to Superman 2, and that took 25 years to come to fruition, whereas this is only 4.
Yeah, that's very true, Matthew. It's funny though, looking back, because we were sort of discussing just before recording the sort of Richard Donner version of Superman 2, and that was very much a sort of polite way of sort of persuading Warner Brothers to release his version, because over the years there's been like photographs and there's TV edits shown on TV, and with the Zack Snyder Justice League cut, it was kind of far more aggressive, and the fans got what they wanted. expected. And it's sort of seeing that. I think the fans out there who saw this film as a holy grail, reviews-wise, have been generally very positive. So I think in terms of improving upon what we saw in the theatrical cut, I mean, he has 4 hours to play with. And he's had the hindsight as well to see how that film turned out. I don't think if Zack got to finish the film at the time, it would no way would have been 4 hours long. It would have been a suitable kind of 2.5 hours, 2:45.
Yeah, exactly.
And still being compromised in some way, if that was going to be the whole story. We've got a situation that there was going to be 2 movies, wasn't there? And they kind of were going to split it. I don't know, but that story that we've been given, I don't think it could be cut in half successfully.
No.
Others, as I tried to chapter it, was it like 6 months ago, maybe less? They were going to say it's going to be an episodic show.
And it kind of was. There are 6 title cards, 7 actually.
Yeah, so it's there, you know.
Yeah, so it almost is. If you want to break this up and do like 6 episodes, you absolutely can.
And I know that a lot of people have watched it in chunks to make it a bit more digestible, which is perfectly understandable, whereas I masochistically watched it all in one go.
I was planning on taking a break and doing like in 2 parts, but I was actually hooked all the way through. Like I was like, I'm just gonna keep watching. I was like, I'm sitting here and my butt got a little sore, but I finished it all in one go.
Yeah. While this is not going to be really a discussion of the sort of fan community, I definitely think that there were elements of the fan community that were a bit toxic, to say the least. I know that there are definitely some people that attack whoever criticizes Snyder. I mean, I've been on the receiving end of that on occasion. And again, that's not because I'm trying to personally attack Snyder, it's just because that's how I feel about the work. I feel that Snyder is a talented filmmaker. I haven't always agreed with his take on the material.
Yeah. I think he's a very strong visualist. You know, he's come from that background of music videos and commercials. I just don't think he's ever managed to sort of create a really kind of structured movie that kind of works as a whole piece. It's all about, wow, this looks amazing, but there's always something not quite right that doesn't sit with me. But I think, honestly, out of the movies he's directed with this sort of DC universe, this is probably his best one in terms of the coherent kind of plot and just taking his time with things. But, you know, he's got loads of time to play with. Obviously, Batman v Superman, which you kind of touched upon earlier, was sort of the groundwork for this film. I hated Batman v Superman and this sort of crowbarring in the death of Superman so early on. The whole tone of the film as well was completely different to Man of Steel, I think. And I just, to me, as a Superman fan, Zack never was a fan of the character. And when you're looking at the theatrical version and the director's cut of Justice League, you can clearly show that, yeah, he's not really a fan of Superman because he gets less screen time in this version.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So what were your thoughts on the Snyder Cut?
I just literally posted my non-spoilerish review today, and I managed to sit through the 4 hours without much difficulty. I was kind of hooked all the way through, which was like really surprised me, because the first half an hour I was like, this is pretty good. What's going on? A bit we'll get to later on, I think, in our discussion, is the sort of nightmare Jared Leto kind of Joker sequence, which really kind of slowed the movie down. I don't think I needed to be in there.
I think it almost kills the movie right then and there.
Yeah. It feels completely out of place. I think in terms of like character development as well, like the Cyborg and the Flash get so much more screen time and really are integral to the story, especially Cyborg himself. And Batman is kind of still Batman, the Zack Snyder Batman. But Wonder Woman's deployed in a good way. You know, she's kind of there to sort of explain the plot, which is kind of missing in the theatrical cut. It's like taking the original version and then for the theatrical cut, there's basically trim everything until you just literally got the basic element of the story. And this one is like a book that isn't missing its chapters. And that's what worked for me. I'm still kind of shocked how much I enjoyed it. So Man of Steel is some good elements in it, but because I'm a big fan of Superman, I felt it was kind of more of a letdown for me in some areas, where this is, okay, I can push Superman aside, I can enjoy the rest of these characters, and Zack Snyder's version really kind of does them justice in that, pardon the pun, you know, with those characters. So yeah, I'd probably say if I had to rate it in some way, it would be 4 out of 5 probably, actually. Yeah.
So yeah, like going into this movie, the conversation was so much about, can this redeem the version we got in 2017? That version is terrible. I think we all agree on that front.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
I didn't appreciate how much the Snyder Cut had actually changed from the theatrical version, because I watched it Snyder Cut first and then rewatched the theatrical, because as it turns out, it was on ITV2 this weekend, so I just recorded that very conveniently. Watching it afterwards, you can see how much of a Frankenstein cut it is, and yeah, the Whedon material is bad. We'll get to that a bit later, honestly, but yeah, you can tell that it's a compromise movie.
that was the conversation. But for me, the surprise was not just that this movie fixed the major problems with the Justice League we got in 2017, but this also fixed the major problems I had with this entire trilogy. When I look at Man of Steel, I like a lot of that movie, but when you get to the climax, it's just bombastic action. It's unrelentless and it never stops. And then you get to Batman v Superman, and it's like this dour tone that's self-indulgent and it never finds its footing. And for this movie, this was the Snyder I always wanted to work on these projects. He has that mythic, godlike appreciation for these characters, but he actually lets them be human and be heroic. That there's more than any of his movies, there's an emphasis on characters saving people, on reducing collateral damage. This has the least amount of destruction of maybe any of the DC movies.
Definitely, yeah.
They're really good at creating spectacular moments, not just that don't involve destruction, but are about avoiding destruction.
Yeah.
We get several character beats of the Flash using his powers to save people, Batman saving people, or Wonder Woman saving people. It kept that Snyder mythic tone, but it finally did the things I wanted these characters in this world to do. I think that's what helped me really get involved with the story. But on top of that, this felt like a Lord of the Rings style epic. I felt like I was watching the Return of the King extended edition. Watching this movie.
It does feel like that. It does have as many endings.
It does.
yeah.
What I kind of liked about the movie was it sort of had this, I would call it like a hypnotic tone, at least for the first half. Everything's in slow-mo, right?
Oh.
That slow-mo kind of serves a purpose, and that like all of these characters are lost in their own worlds, and we slowly get to know them all, and we get to see where they're going. When they all come together, it all feels satisfying in that regard. And one of the criticisms of this world and of this movie in particular was that because there are no setup films to get here, that Snyder has to do all the work that, like, let's say for the Avengers, they didn't need to do that work because they had Thor, they had Captain America, so they didn't have to set those characters up. They could just show up and we'd be good.
Yeah.
And here, Snyder does take that time to give us those origin movies. That's why this movie is 4 hours long, is that this is a Cyborg origin movie, this is a Flash origin movie, and this is an Aquaman origin movie. I actually really got to like this in this sort of epic way. It was different than Marvel. He actually put the legwork in and made me care about these characters. That's what made the movie shine for me.
And Lassie, what did you make of the movie?
Well, in large chunks of it, I was kind of surprised about how unterrible it was. But I have to say I still didn't like it. To me, it still had some of the problems of the previous Snyder DC films. Some of it fixed, but I still thought that one of the biggest problem was that I think Snyder is much more interested in what these heroes can do as opposed to who these heroes actually are. Because whenever they were on screen, it seemed like a way of Snyder showing, look how cool they are, how they look when they do cool stuff. And I didn't really feel that much personality there. With some of them, of course, because we also saw some solo movies which came out after this. But for the most part, I thought that he didn't really know what to do with them when they weren't doing cool stuff. I mean, we will talk about the length later, but I thought the length really was an issue. I thought the use of slow motion was really indulgent. It felt like this is the version he wanted to make, I guess. It would have been different if he actually made it earlier, of course. It wouldn't have been this long. There would be certain scenes maybe not existent. There were some really, really groan-worthy moments for me. And at the end, I didn't really feel like I had gained anything new from this because I was surprised by how similar it still was. I mean, the structure was different, the tone was certainly different, but there was just so much stuff I already knew from the 2017 version. It was kind of like a weird, surreal sitting where it was kind of like being like in the like Bernstein universe.
Yeah.
Where it's like, I remember seeing this movie, but it was kind of different, you know? Of course, this is the case here. One of the main problems was that I wasn't able to separate this movie from its origin.
Right.
The way this movie came into fruition, the way how it was pushed by certain people in a very hateful way. Not all of them, of course, but the minority was really, really loud, as they tend to be. The way that I constantly was thinking about these hateful people got what they wished, got what they forced into existence. The fact that they are now happy really annoys me.
I suppose you look at it like, as you were saying about the sort of, it's still the same kind of story. You could compare it to Alien 3, you know, where you've kind of still got the core story is the same with the extended version, but it's just so much more meat to it.
Yeah.
And you think, oh, okay, this isn't such a slap and dash kind of edit like the theatrical cut was, where they kind of or reshot stuff like to get rid of the ox kind of alien and then change it into a dog. That's the sort of other comparison I kept thinking about while watching Justice League.
Yeah, it's actually a really great comparison, because regarding like how they changed certain stuff, especially the one big flashback where it was Steppenwolf in the Whedon or studio version of 2017, and here it is Darkseid, that really kind of reminds you of things they did in Alien 3 when you compare the cinema version to the assembly version. One nagging thought that came into my head quite often. I know you, Matthew, have read The Disaster Artist, like the actual book.
Yeah, I've read The Disaster Artist, yeah.
There's a part where Greg Sestero talks about Tommy Wiseau's attitude in the editing room, and where he said, and he quotes him, "Nothing will be cut."
That's amazing.
And that's really the case here.
I would definitely agree. This is the most Snydery of Snyder cuts. So it is pure and uncut.
Bigger, longer, and uncut.
And in some ways, that is a considerable improvement on what we got back in 2017, because there is a singular vision here. I think it is beneficial to now see it in one piece. I do have to admit that I felt the length a lot.
All right.
I was looking at the construction of this and kind of going, well, this doesn't need to be here and this doesn't need to be here. Even so, it was nice to see all the pieces, even if I don't think that this was in any way what we would call releasable, but it is what I would argue as being a very, very polished assembly cut.
Yes, it's not releasable in any way in terms of a theatrical sense.
No.
Everyone's streaming now. It's kind of become the sort of norm to have things longer.
It definitely feels like a cut for the fans, which is perfectly fine. I think given the circumstances of it, it's perhaps understandable why Snyder has left all the stuff in. It's not really a refined edit. Well, I'd hate to use the word refined about anything to do with the editing of the theatrical version.
Disciplined.
But I do think that the theatrical version has more of a sense of structure to it, whereas I think the Snyder cut does feel a bit all over the place at times, and certain scenes feel like they're a bit disjointed and out of order. A later edit would have obviously kind of fixed those things. I think that the biggest boons to the movie is that fleshing out the characterization of the various members of the Justice League, but also, as you mentioned before, the music and the color timing make huge amounts of difference to the tone and feeling of the movie, and having that not being betrayed by the edit makes a substantial amount of difference. I think this ties in my opinions on the theatrical version of the movie, where I rewatched it and the Whedon editions stuck out like an absolute sore thumb because they're so flatly shot. Whedon comes from a completely different background. He comes from a television background, and all the scenes in the theatrical cut that were shot by Whedon feel like they were made for a television show. Like, there's no kind of drama or cinematic framing to any of the events on screen. And this is a stark contrast to Snyder, who has a very visual aesthetic to his work, arguably sometimes to his detriment. I always feel like Snyder always kind of pushes everything for the most dramatic effect, which has an effect of actually numbing everything,
diminishing it. Yeah.
It feels like everything is in bold type.
It kind of reminds me like that you talk about like that awful partnership of Whedon's sensibilities do not go along at any way with Snyder's sensibilities. It reminded me a lot of the sequel trilogy, where it's like, I love Rian Johnson and I love J.J. Abrams, but they are not collaborative storytellers. It feels kind of very similar here, where it's like the J.J. Abrams cut of Last Jedi or something like that.
What I realized while watching this is that this also concerns the pacing in a way, the way Snyder films his stuff, because every single moment in this is supposed to be like the biggest, most awesome thing ever. And this results in not much actually feeling all that big. Those moments cancel each other out constantly. I think the epitome of this was like seeing a burger seed falling in slow motion right into the camera. And I was like, if you are making all these moments like so incredibly big, it results in nothing feeling really big or important. Like everything just bleeds into each other tonally, and you are not allowed to appreciate the moments which actually are maybe kind of cool.
I think that's kind of a thing that's across Zack's films for me. It's like, especially going back to things like Watchmen, where I still quite enjoy that movie, but there's a lot of scenes where everything just looks, wow, that looks amazing, but there's some sort of disconnect with the material.
Yeah.
For me as the viewer.
It's because you're focused on the spectacle and you're not engaged in specifically what that scene or that element's about. I will say, I typically feel that way in regards to Snyder's films, especially Batman v Superman. But here, I actually didn't mind the visual glamour, as it were, and thought that for the most part, every cinematic choice enhanced the characters, and I was only ever thinking about the story. I was never being distracted from the story by the mise en scène, as it were.
I feel like the thing that kind of bugged me a little bit was I know Zack is the one that popularized speed ramping, but he definitely does that a lot here. It reminded me of that Garth Marenghi quote, virtually everything that wasn't dialogue was considered for slow motion. It definitely feels like that sometimes in the action scenes, where virtually every moment where you could consider a slow-mo shot is all shot in slow motion, so characters reloading and things like that.
And the speed ramping was not there in either Man of Steel or Batman v Superman.
At Batman v Superman, it was a tiny bit more. In Man of Steel, basically nothing.
Yeah.
The Man of Steel still feels like, to me, Nolan and Snyder kind of clashing in a way.
Kind of feel like with Man of Steel, Snyder was making a Nolan film.
Yeah.
That was what he was trying to do.
Pleasing nobody.
He's kind of trying to follow in the footsteps, wasn't he, to try and capture that success of the Batman films. The thing that always bugged me about Man of Steel was that, it was all shot on shaky cam, kind of over the shoulder all the time. And I was just like, just please use a tripod, please. And he did for Batman v Superman. I was like, oh, thank God. But then, we were just watching a film that's kind of, to me, kind of horrible. But Matthew, you kind of touched upon some of the sort of colour correction and the music. Looking at the Danny Elfman score and hearing the Junkie XL version, which I thought Junkie XL, or Tom Holkenberg's new version of the score, was actually really impressive. I haven't really been a big fan of Junkie XL's kind of work. It's kind of mixed. I like Mad Max, but his other stuff was kind of a little bit hit and miss. His stuff for Zack Snyder's version was kind of far more triumphant and less of the Whams, Hans Zimmer kind of trait. But Danny Elfman, as you kind of go back and rewatch the theatrical cut, where he's throwing in his Batman theme or John Williams' Superman theme. At the time, as a fan of those films, I adore Richard Donner's Superman. I was very happy to hear that, but, continuity from the previous films.
Yeah, musical continuity, yeah.
It didn't fit. It didn't fit at all. And on the album for Danny Elfman's score, you can hear the Batman theme pushed very heavily in the third act, where he bursts through the bubble, as it were, of Steppenwolf's base. In the film, it is played down the mix so low, so I don't want you to hear it. With the colour changes until the final battle, where you've got all this kind of weird branching out of this kind of weird purpley stuff or pink stuff. That's kind of gone in this version, which I thought was interesting.
I think that there is a concerted effort in the Warner Brothers cut, just as a general change, is to lighten the tone, and they took that very literally in terms of the colour grading, which feel at times like a Facebook filter or an Instagram filter, where you kind of tweak the colours very gradually, but you kind of push them to the ridiculous amounts of saturation. It feels like that.
I've seen student films with better cinematography.
Yeah.
It made the suits look very strange, didn't it, with the colour adjustments, and the sort of Batman suit in particular looked kind of weird, and Superman's as well, where they've kind of added kind of like darker elements to sort of give them more muscle definition. But you can't see that originally. The Joss Whedon version, you can kind of see what they were doing with the costumes.
Yeah, that's really the problem. Like, I mean, the 2017 version, it looked incredibly ugly, and when you like Zack Snyder's style and vision, I think this movie would look a lot better to you. The thing is, if you don't like his vision, and I really don't care for it, at least in this case, I've seen some films where I liked it just fine, where it really worked. This one just looked ugly in a different way to me, where it's like, I mean, he was talking about like releasing a black and white version. I think that's still coming out at some point. He really doesn't need to do that, because there's barely any color in this anyway.
It is quite a desaturated color grade this time around, quite muted and quite grey.
I really liked the color grade this time. It reminded me a lot of the visual look of like the second Hobbit movie.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
A little bit in certain scenes, yeah. Also the third one, I think.
There's moments in Star Labs which look really nice.
Yes.
The computer stuff and all the sort of colour, it kind of works. But there's a lot of stuff where, like, Wonder Woman goes to Crete or whatever, and she takes the arrow. There's, like, hardly any colour there, where it should be, like, quite a vibrant kind of thing.
Especially with the fire. Like, the fire should be blown out. It should be.
Yeah.
I do feel like there could have been a slight compromise there, but that's my personal taste more than anything. But It just shows the very stark difference, but also that colour grading plays a substantial role in changing the feel and tone of the movie, which is why, in addition with those musical changes and that plastering by Danny Elfman, because Danny Elfman has often done a lot of superhero themes. He, of course, worked on the Spider-Man films.
And Hulk.
As well as, of course, Batman and many, many others.
So many.
Elfman was clearly brought in to give a more traditional feel to the movie. As we've obviously stated, like, it's just a sort of simple attempt to try and make the audience feel something, and if you put in the old themes, then maybe they'll remember those movies and like this one, play off the audience's nostalgia.
It worked on me.
I think the use of the themes there is like the perfect embodiment of that theatrical cut, because like if you're gonna reuse those old themes, at least do it triumphantly. At least like make it part of the subtext of like this idea of like these characters were deconstructed and now they're being reaffirmed in their classical images and that. But the mixing of those classic themes is so baked to the bottom of the sound mix that you don't even notice it. It's so like cowardly. It's so pathetic.
Yeah, that's really a missed opportunity, because I really, really liked Danny Elfman's score for the 2017 version, because I saw it as kind of like a fan project or like something he was just having fun with in a way.
Yeah.
Maybe he didn't even take the job all of it seriously, or the thing itself wasn't supposed to be taken all of it seriously, but he was like, I'm just having fun with this and springing with themes in here and there. And as a standalone album, it's really, really fun. And in the movie, there are certain moments where it's also really fun. But the thing is, even there, you can tell that it's like the studio breathing down his neck, because the main theme for the actual Justice League sounds very similar to his like Avengers hybrid theme from Age of Ultron.
Right, yeah. As a counter to that, I do believe that of all the things to criticize Man of Steel for, the one thing you can't criticize is that film's score. That score is one of my favorite Hans Zimmer scores of all time.
I liked it, yeah.
For Danny Elfman to come in, it really goes to show that with both Joss Whedon and that entire team he brought on board, there was no respect for the material they were finishing. That so much is clear.
Yeah.
And it's one thing to have disagreements over it, but to have no respect for what the other teams were doing for that creative vision, of course everything fell apart in that theatrical cut. And to not use that Batman theme, to not use that Superman theme, to not even use the Wonder Woman theme.
Oh, you know what? He does. He actually, Danny Elfman actually does use the Wonder Woman material in the bank scene.
Right, he does. He does at like the beginning, right? But not throughout the movie.
No. But I think he wanted to emphasize more like the group feeling. And he was like, I'm not gonna push like the individual character themes, aside from the Batman and Superman stuff, of course, but for the other characters, which at that point we didn't really know all that well, aside from Wonder Woman. He lets like the group theme play, but he actually he gives some flourishes to the Flash. There isn't really something distinct for Aquaman, at least I didn't catch it. I think there is one, but it's very, very faint. I think the score is actually really fun. I didn't really quite like this score, and I actually liked the last few Tom Holkenborg efforts.
As you say, Lassie, the score is fun on its own terms. It's just not compatible with the movie. And I think overall, rewatching the theatrical cut of Justice League, it reminds me of watching, I don't mean to put down Joel Schumacher here, but Batman Forever. It feels kind of like that. It kind of has that tone.
Oh, the sort of shift in tone of music.
Yeah.
That's kind of weird. Yes, that's a good comparison, yeah.
And both movies were following up divisive second movies that were criticized for being too dark.
Yeah, exactly. And as you said, Jonathan, what I really got out of the theatrical cut this time was Whedon's disdain for Snyder's material. What I took away from it was that Whedon wasn't completing the movie, he was trying to fix it in his own image. And when that happened, everything went wrong, because it's clear that Warner Brothers hired him as the director of the Avengers and literally said, hey, make the Avengers again. So all the key exposition scenes are totally reshot. Now we have a group dynamic introduced in the theatrical version where they're now bickering amongst each other, which is very much what they were doing in the first two acts of the Avengers movie.
Yeah.
But here, because the characters, you don't know them properly, it means that you don't care about them because they just end up looking like a bunch of bickering jerks, whereas in the Snyder version, they actually work together as a unit, whereas instead Whedon embraces that kind of false antagonism. And what really surprised me about the Whedon stuff is that I thought, okay, most of his changes are kind of concentrated at the beginning and the end, but actually that's not true. The changes are sustained throughout the entire movie. There's a lot of scenes that are mostly Snyder's, and then they'll cut into a little smarmy one-liner quip just inserted in, and I go, why did you bother?
Like brunch. Like, what is brunch?
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know?
but that must have cost so much money, and it's just like one line per scene. And it's so weird.
I hear you like to talk to fish. You know, that sort of thing. Dresses like a bat. You know, that sort of line that kind of undermines how serious the characters are, but in a way which kind of feels just smug.
There are actually some contributions of this I kind of enjoyed. One of them was one line from Steppenwolf he added, which I liked, where he has the hostages and kills them one by one. Oh, please, I have a family. That's still in the Snyder Cut, but what Whedon added is when Steppenwolf is like, why does everybody keep telling me that?
The second I heard that, it was like, oh yeah, that's Whedon.
That added like a tiny bit more personality to him. And there's another thing, it was like a whole new scene where Aquaman, I mean, it comes out of nowhere, where Aquaman basically just tells like, I don't want to die. I really don't know if I'm up to this task. And then it turns out he sat on Wonder Woman's lasso of truth the entire time. It's kind of hokey because it comes out of nowhere, but I actually really liked that scene.
There's a couple of little things about the Whedon reshoots that I didn't mind, like the callback to Do You Bleed?
Yeah.
Probably was an alright callback.
That would work if it wasn't so obviously green screen.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's like how the film opens, the theatrical cut with
Oh God!
yeah.
It's such a bad sort of CG job, but in terms of summing up who Superman is, it really kind of nails Superman in that little moment there. But yeah, it was just a kind of clunky reshoot.
But what cost, like at that point, the uncanny valleyness of it completely ruins any sentiment that scene might have had.
The Cavill stuff is all ruined by the reshoots. That immediately tanks them right out the gate. The thing that really surprised me about the theatrical version, though, is how much decent footage that Whedon had, and he just junked it or reshot it in inferior ways for no reason.
Yeah.
Whedon pissed away the studio's money on things that could have easily been kept.
And not just could have been kept, but I would say the best material of the movie is the stuff that was cut.
Some of the stuff that he chose to remove, I genuinely don't understand the logic behind it, other than, was he trying to get a director's credit? He's fixing things that weren't problems, like that first scene between Lois and Martha. Great scene in the Snyder version. And then, for some reason in the Whedon cut, they decide that they're going to reshoot this in the Daily Planet offices.
It looks like a drug commercial.
It's so flatly shot, and it looks like it's filmed in a random office at the production studio.
It's really bad, isn't it? I'm surprised it didn't go to Milton Keynes and shoot additional bits there, like Superman 4.
It reminds me of that bit at the end of The Snowman. And do you remember the final scene where Michael Fassbender's supposed to be in the police briefing room? It's clearly the production's break room. It's like that. It's so bad.
Absolutely, yeah. The talking scene between the two of them kind of turns into something else in the Snyder Cut, but I was like, cut it just a little bit earlier. Like, there's really no reason why you didn't keep this. It's really kind of a nice scene.
With the Cavill stuff, you go, why did he bother reshooting the scene with Lois and Clark in the cornfield? Why did he not prioritize having the footage that he didn't need to CG? Like, why? Why?
I think at that point, you can't look at this in terms of him, not even him trying to make his own movie or him trying to sell. Like, I think what Whedon was doing, and we've learned a lot about Whedon in the last 4 years or so.
Oh, yeah.
I think he's just a spiteful person. I think this is about power. I think this was about control. The idea that this was perhaps creative self-sabotage is not outside the realm of possibility.
Oh, yeah, because after, like, the theatrical release came out and people were, like, shitting on Steppenwolf and all of that, he liked,
and he liked
all of those tweets and all of that. So it's really kind of interesting. And I think even he said that he got the job to repurpose the movie because I think that there was something, and maybe I'm butchering the quote here, where I was basically saying that he maybe had some plans for, like, a Batgirl movie or something.
That was exactly it.
Yeah, and that's why the studio was like, okay, come in. And then later he said, yeah, I was just bullshitting. I had no idea for, like, a Batgirl movie. I just blatantly lied to them.
Oh, really?
And I was like, dude, it's... yeah.
God. Because it's clear that Josh wasn't going to be getting a credit on this. I mean, his job, as I think Matthew said very early on, was to sort of come in and just finish this movie. But yeah, it is still baffling why he decided to reshoot stuff.
And so extensively.
Yeah, maybe it's his way of trying to condense down the plot. Like, we're going to reshoot this bit, but sort of cover these areas in a quicker amount of time.
And also, the 2-hour mandate from the studio.
Yeah.
That was always going to be impossible for him, to me.
Oh, yeah.
As we've kind of all fully aware, these characters had no set-up movie. So it's so difficult to introduce all these characters, have a solid start, middle, and end, and for this kind of big team-up film.
It might also be a case of maybe the studio gave him a certain amount of money and said, you have this much for the reshoots. And then Whedon kind of realized that I don't really even need that much. And so he reshot all of that stuff to justify the budget they gave him, I guess. Maybe.
But the theatrical cut is still kind of baggy. There's still a lot of scenes where nothing's happening.
Oh, yeah.
That's the funny thing about it. You know, I mean, with this, the 4-hour cut, even though it's 4 hours long, there's a lot of stuff happening to sort of somewhat justify its length. It's going to be the topic of discussion for years to come with this kind of theatrical cut and Snyder cut. If there's ever a book or documentary about it, that will probably be the most fascinating element about these movies.
Oh, for sure. I would love to even see like the original Snyder cut like a year ago before any work was done on it. I'd love to see that version.
Yeah. Because obviously, as we discussed, sort of the redesign of Steppenwolf and sort of the introduction of Darkseid.
Oh, it's so much better. Even like subtle things that made such a big improvement.
Yeah.
All of the action scenes are 10 times better in this version. They have so much better sense of physicality and momentum. Like in the theatrical cut, they're edited to have no rhythm to them.
Yeah, they're all chopped up.
Oh yeah, the way Steppenwolf moves has a real presence, has a real physicality. It reminded me a lot of like the Hulk even in the Avengers films. It felt believable in that world.
Steppenwolf felt like a real threat in this movie.
Yeah.
He felt like a credible villain. It also had a interesting motive. He wasn't just doing Darkseid's bidding. He was trying to prove his worth. Sort of implied that he's kind of maybe turned against him in the past or he's done something bad. Then, you know, he goes, oh, you've got to capture another 100,000 worlds before you can come back or whatever.
It adds a new dimension to him. It sort of reminded me of the Silver Surfer vaguely.
Yeah.
I still think to some degree that Steppenwolf is a bit of a one-dimensional bad guy in that he exists to bring the Justice League together in much the same way as the plot is a sort of gathering quest that is purely functional.
He's a means to an end, and you buy it because he's not the focus. The focus is the Flash, Cyborg, Batman. You're invested in those characters, and he is a means to that end, and I'm fine with it. It's the same way Marvel does it. I would like more three-dimensional villains, but sometimes you only have so much screen time.
I guess, maybe. I didn't really see that much more of a dimension to him. I was like, oh, he wants to suck up to his boss, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know why people like are praising him online as one of like the best comic book villains. I think that's really an overstatement. And I thought his design was bad and clearly unfinished in the 2017 version. This new design, I think, lacks some personality. Like, he looks much more like a monster in the face.
He had like a little puppy dog look to him.
Yeah, that's it. Like, in the 2017 version, there was a little bit more personality in the face and also in the voice. They really overdid his voice in this new version, I thought.
Is it the same voice actor, or do they get a new different voice?
It was.
Yeah, it was Ciaran Hinds.
From Game of Thrones and The Terror or whatever.
Yeah, except he's virtually unrecognizable here in either version.
Yes.
Yeah, that's it. Like, they really overdid his voice and the way he was designed. There was one cool moment. He was like shot with arrows and then his armor destroys the arrows.
Yes, I loved that. That was so cool.
That was a good moment, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I was like, okay, this is cool, I'm not gonna lie. But the way he was designed really reminded me of the Michael Bay version of the Shredder.
Yes.
This big, like, penis envy kind of design.
Blades on top of blades. Spiky.
Blades and spikes, and that means it's awesome. Look how awesome it is.
I suppose you could touch upon the sort of the ideas of the mother boxes, because obviously, again, it's another plot dealing with terraforming, but the mother boxes were apparently never in the comics supposed to do that. They're sort of boom tubes that sort of transport, I presume, one dimension to another. But the anti-life equation thing, that should have been the main focus point, I think, of this movie.
Yeah.
By the end, you're like, oh, it's about this, and Earth is kind of the planet that Darkseid needs to conquer. And I do like the kind of setup that Superman's scream wakes up the mother boxes. Years ago, when Superman Returns was coming out, and you have that moment where Lex stabs Superman in the back and he screams, and someone said to me, you know, there's a moment where you hear his scream throughout the world. It never happens in the film. It's actually a moment they should have included, because you never hear Superman scream that much, apart from like Superman the movie, which is a really powerful scream.
Oh yeah.
And in this one, they, you know, deploy that and it works. So as I was sort of referring to the anti-life equation, that should have been the focus and not another terraforming plot, which is a bit of a shame, really.
That's something that just gets thrown into this, and also that is one thing I would kind of like call a plot hole or something, or at least like some kind of contrivance.
It's set up, isn't it? It's set up for another film.
It's a setup, but it's also something that didn't really make much sense to me, because basically Steppenwolf rediscovers that this equation, which I guess is kind of like a barcode or something, or it has like the function of a barcode for destroying the world or something. I'm not quite sure. They don't explain it that well.
No, in the comics, it's supposed to essentially give Darkseid the power to manipulate. That's how he kind of manipulates Superman.
Oh yeah, okay.
To do his bidding, basically. That's what the Batman's seeing in his nightmares.
And I guess he embedded it in the earth and then forgot it there, I guess. And then there's this whole revelation where Steppenwolf goes to him and says, I rediscovered it. It was on Earth. And I was like, back then, like, Darkseid was there. Wouldn't you remember on what planet you lost this really important thing?
Yeah.
And you lost this whole battle and almost your life? This really didn't make any sense. The Darkseid didn't know where the equation was.
And there's a really easy workaround on that if they just said that Darkseid sent Steppenwolf there to do his bidding, whether A, because he was traumatized the last time he went, or B, as a test for Steppenwolf, as like a way to finally set things straight.
Yeah.
That would have worked just fine.
Otherwise, though, the plot is far more coherent in this Snyder version, not least of which because the exposition scenes are restored. I think while Whedon might have reshot them for the purpose of they are very solemn in terms of exposition, I don't think that they need to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
There's one more thing I wanted to say about Steppenwolf, because there's something really hilarious jumped out to me. In terms of like his minions, they actually get a proper introduction in the Whedon version, in the first Batman scene, which was just a complete reshoot, where they basically establish like what the parademons are. They can smell fear and all of that. In this one, they just kind of they're his minions, whatever. They don't really get an introduction.
Would you say they were established in Batman v Superman, but that was a dream sequence, so I guess that doesn't count.
Yeah, that was a dream sequence and you didn't know what they were supposed to be, but in the Whedon version tries to explain what they are, which is just dropped here because it was a reshoot. But there was one hilarious thing I noticed when I watched it back in 2017, because the finale, because they set up, they sense fear and all of that, and then at the end of the battle in 2017, Steppenwolf is defeated and then his minions gather around him and he's like, I'm still going to win, and they sense your fear or something like that, and then one of the heroes goes, no, I think it's your fear they're sensing, and then they grab him and pull him into this hell gate, whatever, and then he disappears. That scene is almost beat by beat and line by line ripped off from the DreamWorks animated movie Rise of the Guardians.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
It feels very much like a Disney end, very much like Scar in The Lion King.
Yeah.
They just straight up ripped off an animated DreamWorks movie for Justice League.
Whereas in the Snyder version,
He gets stabbed through the heart and gets his skull crushed and cut off, and it's gnarly.
yeah, Wonder Woman cuts his head off as he flies back into Darkseid's portal.
Do you guys think it's suitable for younger kids to watch that film?
No.
Well, this movie was rated R already.
Parents would still watch it, though, probably not think about it, would they? And just let their kids watch it. But I don't think it was that bad.
It felt very PG-13.
Yeah.
Kids have seen Deadpool. This is not as bad.
I was surprised to see Wonder Woman cut off his head. I was like, oh, that's a bit harsh, you know.
There is definitely a slight tonal difference. It's more like the sort of R-rated version of Batman v Superman, which still got a 12 certificate in the UK, where there's a couple of extra blood spurts, but otherwise...
It's the same movie.
Yeah, it's got a couple of extra F-bombs in it. I gotta be honest, those don't need to be in the movie.
I liked the first one. I hated the second one.
It's a Batman swearing, isn't it?
There's actually three. There's three. There was some other one fairly early on.
Cyborg says F the world at one point. I like that.
Okay.
While Whedon's stuff is definitely, to some extent, condensing for the sake of running time, a lot of Whedon's material also recontextualizes Snyder's. There's Snyder's stuff in the theatrical Whedon cut, but it's in a different manner, so it changes even on smaller details.
Or like other things. For instance, like one of my favorite bits in the movie is how they use the Flash in the new version. For instance, that scene where they resurrect Superman and he's running to touch the cube. That's a setup for what the Flash will do later. And so like overall, the movie has a lot of little cool tiny setups and payoffs that are completely missing in the Justice League version.
It's a coherent story.
Yeah.
Well, because it shows that the Flash can, he's, obviously the Cyborg was integral to get inside the mother box, but also the Flash was so important to sort of save everyone, because it was obviously they were too late. He had to reverse time, like Superman, but he sort of reverses time to save the day.
The biggest problem with the theatrical cut, like of all the things we've talked about, the second Superman is revived, that movie lacks any tension, the theatrical cut.
Yeah, that's true.
And now, what they've done a really good job of is making every member of the team essential to saving the day.
Definitely.
I think that core problem has been resolved. involved, at least for me.
Superman's less of a Deus Ex Machina.
Yeah, because Superman just turns up overpowered, and that's the thing.
Yeah.
I suppose it's a jumping point to sort of his return, because the fans always wanted to see Superman in the black suit. I don't know why. I never understood people's obsession with that.
Oh, I know why. It's cool.
Because it's cool and black.
Because it looks cool.
He wore it in the comics as a regeneration suit when he came back from the dead.
Technically, it is a regeneration suit here as well.
It would make sense if he wore the black suit when he's evil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they shot it with him in the blue and red and yellow suit during those moments. So they just colour corrected it again.
They did.
Because that's something I thought the original plan was. I thought maybe part of the original Snyder version was that Superman came back, but he was actually evil.
Yeah.
And the fight scene against the Justice League, which is pretty close in the Whedon cut, was like the setup for now he's evil and he would actually be leading Darkseid's or Steppenwolf's army, and that would be the reason why his suit was black. And then during the finale, he might be turned good again. But in this, no, he just has the black suit because the Snyder fans and himself, they think that it looks cool.
That was the early rumours, wasn't it? Like, oh, Zack's version, he's evil. It's just like fan spin and speculation.
Yeah.
It ends up being never true because they all thought he had a beard and stuff.
Yeah.
No.
Turns out it's simpler than that.
One thing that I thought was funny in this version, the one action scene I hated in theatrical but I actually liked here was the opening Wonder Woman action scene. And I kind of loved how they embraced just how powerful she was. Like, she was knocking those dudes down like rag dolls. It was glorious.
She killed one of them, didn't she?
Yeah, throwing them into walls.
Yeah.
It was kind of a little bit awkward because obviously Wonder Woman has been set up in the solo films like Patty Jenkins as being a bit more benevolent and a bit more generous.
You watch the mall scene
Yeah.
in 84 and then go to this scene.
Yeah.
It's night and day.
It's like seeing like Zack Snyder, then the Wonder Woman 84 was like Richard Lester, kind of like
Yeah.
Wonder Woman, you know.
It's really awkward, even in this movie, because it feels like it's trying to play towards what was already established in Patty Jenkins' solo film. So you have the sequence where Wonder Woman throws bad guys into walls and she obliterates them to the point where she blasts out the window of the building onto the police outside.
That was like the hint of Snyder. It's like, I had to get one of those in there.
If you think where Justice League now fits within these movies, Aquaman as well, the world they've designed for Atlantis is so different to what we saw in
Yeah.
Justice League.
Like, you look at Volko.
It feels like continuity is still kind of different with the established worlds.
Even in the theatrical version, it didn't line up with the Aquaman that we got, but
Yeah.
it's definitely clear that Aquaman was heavily revised after the release of Justice League. It was completely rethought.
Oh, definitely. Because in Justice League, it felt like such a small world, didn't it?
It did, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And Atlantis did. I think there's one shot in the Zack Snyder's version where you can see the city in the distance. I think that's kind of as a placeholder to say, okay, this is kind of an offshoot where we're a bit further away from the actual main hub, as it were.
Yeah, it feels kind of weird.
The stuff with Willem Dafoe is new in the Snyder Cut.
Yeah.
What do you guys think of the music choices, like the actual songs they put in?
Oh, God.
Because there's only one I liked, which was when the Flash saves that woman and takes that hot dog.
Yes, I liked that.
The song when those ladies are singing when Aquaman leaves,
Oh, yeah.
it went on for too long. I was like, oh, God.
Yeah, easy cut right there.
Yeah,
It feels
yeah.
like Hereditary's about to start.
Because in the theatrical cut, when Aquaman's like, he saves the one dude and he puts him in the bar and he's like, drinks on him and he walks out.
Yeah.
And like in the theatrical cut, it's the White Stripes. It's the song from the trailer of now.
Yeah.
It's like this badass rock
Yeah.
song. And this version, it's like this really mellow. It's like, I'm trying to remember what the song was, but it was completely different.
That's when it kind of falls into those kind of music video trappings where it just goes on for a little bit too long. They slow everything down. And it's just like, I know what he's trying to do, but it's kind of outstays its welcome in some areas.
Those track choices too often are really on the nose in Snyder's films.
Yeah, extremely. Like, I kind of had Suicide Squad flashbacks during those sequences.
Okay, nothing in here is as bad as Suicide Squad, though.
Let's be clear on that. It's not quite as bad as Suicide Squad, but it's still a bit distracting.
But it's not quite Guardians of the Galaxy, or yeah.
Not quite, but it's kind of very obvious choices. It reminded me of Watchmen from time to time. But in Watchmen, I actually liked most of the songs he used, and that was also obvious.
Yeah. Sort of evergreen, aren't they, those songs?
But I really disliked the song choices here, especially during the Flash sequence, where I think most people really liked that scene. I really didn't like it because It's like a Disney movie where it's like the song explains what's going on. It's just so on the nose, and it just completely freezes the movie, obviously.
Part of what I liked about this movie in comparison to the other DC movies, and what that scene sort of cements, is that we see characters having fun, expressing themselves through their powers.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what I always wanted out of Superman. And that's what I like about the Raimi Spider-Man films, is that idea that, like, his life is miserable, but the second he puts on the suit, he gets to truly be himself. That's why I felt with that Flash scene. It's like that moment where no one's watching. He's having his moment, and like he's having that moment in the spotlight.
I have mixed feelings on that Flash scene because I feel like that is an easy cut. I know it's Flash's introduction generally, but it doesn't serve anything else in the movie. I know it's one of the more upbeat moments, and that was actually one of the things that surprised me about this new cut, is that I was expecting it to be tonally quite similar to Batman v Superman, especially when Snyder was making weird proclamations like, there'll be no humor in this cut.
There was.
Did you watch your own movie, Zach?
Yeah.
There's plenty of it. It's not oppressively dour like Batman v Superman. I welcome that, especially Ezra Miller's Flash. I think that he definitely adds some welcome notes of humor there, but there's also other characters as well that also add some humor. I think that Miller's Flash grated on me a bit.
Yeah, totally.
I don't understand why he has to run like a complete plonker. Like he's ice skating, isn't he? Like all the time. It's weird.
Yeah, it looks like that.
When you watch someone run fast, like Stallone in Rocky or Tom Cruise, they are like arms stiff, running at top speed, but he runs like he's an ice skater. It's bizarre.
And I guess that might be the point. They wanted to give him this really distinct run, because at that point we had seen several people with speedrun powers in cinema already.
Let's make it worse.
I was really surprised by how many of the jokes actually were from the Snyder version, apparently.
Yeah.
The Flash one, the one at the rooftop, I thought was for sure a Whedon joke, and that was Snyder.
That was like the only part I actually liked of his humor. I don't know, like I think Whedon was a more talented writer when it came to humor than Terrio and Snyder or whoever else like had his hands on this script, because for the most part his gags really fell flat to me. And I think some of the Whedon contributions were a little bit funnier here and there, but sometimes it was also annoying because I found him quite unbearable in this. I thought he was at least tolerable in the Whedon version.
I think when it comes to the humour, I think that that's one of the areas where I ponder where there was already a response to Batman v Superman. There was an attempt to try and lighten the tone somewhat from that movie.
There was. So I've done a bit of research on this. When Snyder was making the movie, it was two people. One of them was Jeff Johns, but like they were Warner Brothers' eyes and ears on the production. They were on every moment of the set. And it was this idea that like Snyder always kind of had to get approval for a lot of this version. Like, you know, this is his vision for the most part. But even going into this movie is to some degree still compromised. That this is not the full extent of what he set out to make. That this was going to be a two-parter, and how this movie ends was the end of part one. Because they were going to go into two-parter Justice League movie, even as early back as early 2016 or so.
Yeah.
They were planning on making a two-parter. Then Batman v Superman came out. It had a huge opening and then flopped right after. So like it's hard to judge how that movie performed because it made so much money so fast and then made not much money after that.
Just word of mouth, isn't it? Just killed it.
Yeah.
If part two was going to be dealing with Darkseid, right, which is probably clear, you know, by the end of this movie.
Yeah. Oh, it's certainly.
It's still trying to get to this kind of super villain very quickly.
Yeah.
That's always bothered me about this new DC universe. We'll just get to Avengers style adventure.
Yeah.
Most people kind of really wanted a Man of Steel 2 or give it some breathing space. The reaction to this, and people want to restore the Snyderverse, whatever.
Yeah.
Warner Brothers are like, no, we've moved on from this kind of shared universe stuff. We're just going to focus on these separate things.
They need to take a movie at a time.
Yeah, and I think The Flash, you know, also he's going to be dealing with the multiverse, so that may correct what Zack had done, and by the end of that movie, we'll probably have a more of a Richard Donner style Superman. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's funny because Warner Bros. Really put their eggs in one basket when it came to Snyder, and it's a strange thing because the reception to Man of Steel was very polarizing, and then that's a very shaky house of cards to build your franchise on. I think that was only exacerbated by Batman v Superman.
The reception to that movie has always been weird. Critically, it was mixed. Box office-wise, it was pretty strong. But, like, I remember, like, the DVD and Blu-ray sales were, like, amazing for that movie. So there was a strong fan base for that movie, clearly. But, yeah, like, a proper Man of Steel 2, I think, was the right decision. And they just went right to Batman v Superman.
I actually think the polarizing reaction to Man of Steel was the reason why Warner Bros. Said we need to bring Batman in immediately because that's what people like.
Yeah.
And that's That's when they started to rush it.
That's the problem, is that clearly by this point Warner Brothers was playing catch-up. There is a lot of things about this new cut that are substantially improved, but I feel like a lot of the issues that I had with Justice League back in 2017, like the fact that it was the culmination of trying to build up this Marvel-style universe without really laying the groundwork properly, feeling like they rushed it and feeling a bit one-dimensional and exists to get all these characters in one space. I don't think overall this cut changes my feeling on that. I still think that this is a product of that, but it's just a better version of it.
If I were to like single out the worst thing about this Snyder vision, the one thing that like bugs me the most, as apparent here in the very end, are those nightmare-esque teases for future movies.
Oh my god.
That was a problem for me.
I hate that mentality of, we got something really cool, just wait 3 movies.
Yeah.
It's gonna be awesome in like 5 years. Like, I'm of the opinion of just make the fucking movie. I don't care about canon, just make the damn movie. That's what worked for Logan, it worked for Deadpool. If you have a vision, do it.
Yeah, just make that standalone movie good.
Yeah.
Don't worry about like trying to please the audience 2 steps along.
Or don't tease me for 5 years
Yeah.
about this awful nightmare vision and don't deliver on anything.
The stuff that people hated most about Batman v Superman largely came from the nightmare stuff, which comes completely out of nowhere and takes up about 5-10 minutes of that movie. You don't know what the hell is going on. It's setting up for stuff that was probably about 5 movies down the line at least.
Yeah.
Also, what's the problem with the nightmare scenes in Batman v Superman is that the movie already is extremely stylish, so you don't recognize that they are dream sequences until it's way too late, which is also a problem with the opening. Because with the opening of Batman v Superman, you're watching like this montage of the parents getting killed, and I was like, okay, I'm with this so far. And then you're like, what the fuck is happening? Like the bat tornado all of a sudden.
The moment in the Snyder Cut where Steppenwolf finds out about the anti-equation, whatever, the scene comes out of nowhere, and you're like, what the hell is going on? Until the next scene, they explain it.
Yeah.
Story-wise, it should be the other way around. You should have some setup.
Snyder is very bad with flashbacks and sort of episodic structure like that, like the nightmare sequence. One of my problems with this new cut is the amount of flashback expository sequences that are quite lengthy, and I feel like that would have bogged down the pacing of the movie in a shorter edit as well.
Yeah.
The flashback with Cyborg, that's a fairly lengthy flashback sequence. It's necessary because obviously we need to flesh out that character because it's the first time we've really seen him properly.
Yeah.
But even so, that's a fairly big chunk of the movie, and then you've got the flashback setting up the mother boxes, and you've got the sequence on Themyscira, which feels like a separate thing to everything else. You know, it does feel like there's a lot of kind of episodic patches in the movie, which is fine in the longer version, but I'd imagine pacing-wise, if you're making this for a cinematic movie, you'd have long chunks of it where the Justice League kind of fall out of it.
Oh, yeah.
The epilogue is terrible in this movie because it's literally a culmination of Snyder's worst traits for setting up stuff that is never going to happen. Okay, the Lex stuff, it needs to be here because obviously that was stuff that Snyder shot, and it's interesting to see it setting up a different movie than what it was setting up in the theatrical version.
Can I talk for a second about, like, not only that these final 3 scenes in particular are bad, but the flow of drama is so laughable that you have this tease with Lex Luthor where he says, an eye for an eye, which we all think, great, I set up the Batman movie, which we all know fell apart and became the Matt Reeves thing.
With him against Deathstroke, instantly all of his shots were redone in the theatrical version. He looks different in the Snyder cut. I don't know if it's an improvement or not, but he's different.
So again, we have that set up. I understand the movie never going to exist, but I'm fine. Keep it in there. That's the tease. That's the beat you're going to end on. Batman versus Deathstroke. What's the next scene? Oh, it's Batman and Deathstroke together and they're a team and they're going to fight Superman.
Yeah, what?
That made no sense. I was like, what?
And Batman's hanging out with Amber Heard's Mera, who has a weird English accent in this that I don't recall her having in Aquaman.
Yeah, that was clearly dropped.
Yeah.
I'm fine with stuff like that because sometimes these actors try something and it doesn't work, and so then it's the sequel. It reminds me a lot of, like, in WandaVision, they address how, like, Scarlet Witch, like, her accent's completely inconsistent.
Halle Berry in the first X-Men movie had a certain accent which they dropped after that.
Right, yes, that's a perfect example.
The whole nightmare sequence is, for me, is kind of killed by Jared Leto and his Joker.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. He was worse than Suicide Squad.
Yeah, I wasn't a fan of his interpretation.
Was anyone?
Jared Leto is.
Reactions online is all like, because he had this conversation with Batman in this nightmare sequence, people are like, oh, this is like the best interpretation. Well, it's the best conversation between Batman and Joker.
That's just not true, and they know it.
It's not true at all. And I think that what kills his performance is his laugh. He just sounds like a demented crow.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have the sort of grandeur or the sort of insanity that comes with like Mark Hamill or Heath Ledger. Yeah, it wasn't good. And the camera holds on him for ages.
It's an interminable scene.
Yeah, it goes on forever.
Yeah.
Leto is so bad as the Joker. My problem with Leto's Joker is that it feels like a try-hard version of Ledger's Joker. It doesn't feel like it has its own original personality. Leto's just kind of doing weird stuff. Ooh, look at me, I'm being weird. Let me improvise this reach-around line and have this weird homoerotic tension with Batman. There's a really funny review on Letterboxd where someone just literally just takes that scene and just describes it with the most kind of flamboyant euphemisms for what's going on, really playing up the subtext of that. It's a very funny review. That scene goes on for what felt like an absolute eternity and nothing's happening there. It's just them two prattling on endlessly.
And they didn't even have the balls to say that they lived in a society. I mean, come on.
Yeah, they had that line in the trailer and they didn't put it in the movie. Cowards.
Cowards.
It's so stupid. I know that scene was a reshoot.
Yeah.
But Jesus Christ, couldn't they have shot like one other angle of that scene?
Yeah, it's very tight, very tightly shot.
Yeah, very tight, always from behind. Like, couldn't they just roll the green screen around? It was just so claustrophobic. It was so clunky. It was,
They should have cut to reaction shots of the other characters just going, what the fuck's going on here? You know?
That'd be funny.
Everything just feels disconnected.
And then Bruce wakes up and you get the Martian Manhunter bit at the end, and Affleck's so checked out by that point, and I'm looking at him going, oh yeah, I feel you, bro. I feel you.
Because I didn't mention him in my review because it's kind of, you know, trying to avoid any spoilers, but he definitely needs a lot more work done in the sort of CG department. It's very kind of like a PlayStation 3 or 4 cutscene.
He reminded me of Dragon Ball Evolution version of Piccolo, but that was at least makeup.
I've seen a photo of Martian Manhunter in the DC TV universe. He looks way better.
He's good in Supergirl. Yeah, he pops up. And I don't mind him appearing at all. You know, Martian Manhunter. It's great character. I think the final shot in the movie shouldn't have been Martian Manhunter. It should have been Superman.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, Superman just having a conversation and then flying away would have been a really triumphant.
Well, technically, by that point, the movie's been over for about 25 minutes. It has a final shot, and it's Clark going into the camera.
Yeah.
And then it blacks out and goes into another set of epilogues.
I find it funny that the whole movie's about the importance of Superman and bringing him back, and the movie then ends on 3 scenes about Batman.
Yeah.
And also evil Superman in the second to last scene, where it's just like they're kind of just shitting on his image again, which we're trying to fix in this movie, actually. And also, yeah, it was really hilarious in the final scene because, like, seeing Ben Affleck just don't give a shit.
His arms are very thin. Obviously, it's new stuff. He's like, I'm not working out. You know, it takes ages.
I'm not working out. I'm not pretending I care about what's happening on screen.
Well, that's the funny thing. Like, if you look at all the versions of Justice League that, you know, when they first shot it, Ben was in shape.
He was huge, wasn't he?
When they did the reshoots in 2017, he was significantly bigger, and you could tell.
You can tell he can barely move in that bat suit, to be honest.
Yeah.
There's a bit in the film where he kicks one of the minions, whatever, doing that sort of battle, and it's the slowest kick ever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that.
It's like, trying to kick him. Yeah, it's always been a common thing, isn't it, for the Batman films, that the actors cannot move in the suits. I think only Christian Bale has the novelty.
And that's I like that Dark Knight suit because they made it so that he can really be agile.
He can move. He can move his neck.
They address it in the film and it really works.
I love that. They made the subtext text in that regard.
I actually think in Batman v Superman, in that warehouse takedown sequence, I think they did a good job of him being able to move and taking out all of these guys.
To be fair, that is 99% doubles, but that's expected.
Oh, God,
sure.
yeah, they can move in the suit, yeah. But Ben Affleck, he's really restrained in that suit. It's just like so stiff. He's just like, trying to walk around in it. It's probably not fun for him to play.
You look at Man of Steel, and that was a movie about Snyder really having so much fun realizing Superman. The way he visualizes Superman is amazing in that film. And then for Batman v Superman, it's like he kind of forgot about Superman and went all in on just finding cool ways to present Batman.
Yeah.
And then going to this movie, it's like he forgot about both of those two characters, and now he's all in on like Wonder Woman and The Flash and Cyborg.
It's really hilarious hilarious how sidelined Batman is during the climax. Like, he barely does anything.
Yeah.
He's trying to play catch up. He's like, oh, guys, he's just out of breath.
Let's be honest, if you were Batman, as he says, his superpower is being rich. He's just a normal, average human being. What is he going to do about an alien invasion? I don't know.
It's that final pose shot, isn't it, where Superman has to pull him up. Everyone's already waiting for him. He's like, oh, wait for me, guys.
Wait for me.
It's really quite telling, yeah.
I did like the one action scene with like the middle central action scene where it's like Wonder Woman's taking on Steppenwolf, the Flash taking on sane people, Batman's taking on one parademon, and like he gets his grappling hook knocked out. I liked that little bit of like he has to struggle to fight one of them.
It reminded me of the sequence in Iron Man 2 where Jon Favreau and Black Widow are infiltrating like the bad guy layer.
That's exactly what it is.
And then he's like, I got one. Like he punched one of them and she had taken out like a dozen guys or something like that.
Yeah. Well, it just shows you that, Batman, he's human. He can't compete with these guys. And it sort of falls in trappings of like Superman is kind of, why does Superman need a Justice League? That's what Jerry Seinfeld said. He's Superman. He doesn't need these people,
I just wanted to go back to the Martian Manhunter thing for a second, because I wanted to talk about the Lois and Martha scene, which is a really great scene in the Snyder version, until directly after, where it reveals, oh, Martha is actually Martian Manhunter in disguise, and you just go, what the why?
Well, yeah, because it shows that like Martha didn't give a shit then. She didn't want to come and talk to her.
It's bizarre because there is sort of this through line of Martha travelling to Metropolis from the Kent farm.
Yeah.
Then it gets to that scene, you go, have we been following Martian Manhunter driving a car to Metropolis? What is going on?
Was Martian Manhunter the one who was kidnapped in Batman v Superman? Because that'd be hilarious.
Then Martian Manhunter turns into the General from Man of Steel and Batman v Superman, and it's just go, what?
Yeah, so that's who he's supposed to be the whole time. That general has supposed to have been Martian Manhunter.
Yeah, but that's just a revelation that's like, okay, that doesn't really add anything, and it just makes things more bewildering. If that was the case, why didn't you do more, mate? You're Martian Manhunter. You could have done more than just stand around as a general.
Yeah, exactly. That just recontextualizes everything in a way that makes zero sense.
Yeah.
So when Martha appears eventually in the cornfield, you go, is it Martha? Is it Martian Manhunter again? Like, it's unnecessary. Doesn't need to be there. Easy cut right there.
Easiest cut in the movie. That and the Joker scene.
I want to briefly mention here, one of the things that really caught my attention while I was rewatching the Whedon cut was not just the allegations of misconduct and racism that Fisher has claimed, but also, of course, all the stuff that's come up about Whedon with women on Buffy and everything, and the way that theatrical version treats women is appalling.
The thirsty line?
Oh.
Yeah, Martha saying the thirstiest reports made me want to gag.
Oh, that was really wrong. Jesus.
The cupping from the Flash of Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
And that was in Age of Ultron, too. Like, get new material, dude.
The bit where Aquaman fawns over Wonder Woman really kind of in a slobbering kind of way, which gets an even worse dimension when you read the extracts of Joss Whedon's Wonder Woman script.
Oh, yeah.
There's one scene in Zack's version where you sort of see like Wonder Woman and Bruce sort of trying to reach for the mouse, and they're like, oh, sorry, they sort of apologise. I thought there might have been some setup there to have some sort of flirting nature to it, but they don't go anywhere with it, do they?
One of the things that was cut, that Snyder wanted to have in his original Justice League two-parter, that was cut before he shot it, was that Bruce Wayne and Lois Lane would be in a romance.
Yeah.
God.
Oh, Jesus, no.
Thank God that didn't happen.
Superman would have been pissed when he came back, really angry.
Yeah.
That bit with the mouse actually was kind of like a cute human moment, like something that would happen naturally.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought of.
And also, like, funny thing is, because in this cut, it's kind of like the Flash fawning over Wonder Woman a bit, where it's like, you think she might be into younger guys, and
And I like the line, I'm like, everyone's a younger guy. I liked that.
yeah, everyone's a younger guy. She's like 1,000 years old or something.
Now you mentioned the Flash, it's like, because he's also said a few times he loves Superman, he's a big idol. In the Whedon cut, you have that great moment at the end where they have the race, where they're clearly shot in the fucking field at Leavesden.
Yeah.
But it's like, that's a moment which I think kind of worked, because Superman and Flash do have a race in the comics and so forth. So they don't have that payoff in this version where the Flash gets to talk to
It's
Superman.
like one has a setup, one has a payoff, and the two cuts don't overlap.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a culmination of another thing about the theatrical version, where it has these kind of cheap fan-pleasing moments, but I think that the Snyder cut has its own cheap fan-pleasing moments. They're just different fan-pleasing moments.
Yeah, exactly. It's a different kind of fan service.
One of the other other things in the Whedon cut that thank God was gone was like on top of all this bad stuff with Wonder Woman, that movie just like framed her ass so often. It was bizarre. It was just hugging it.
But the funny thing is, most of those shots are still in here. They're just cropped out because of the format.
No, they wouldn't be cropped out. They would have been
expanded out.
Yeah, actually expanded out. So we want to talk about the aspect ratio at all?
Also, he became obsessed with IMAX doing the sort of post-production of Batman vs Superman, but he didn't shoot Justice League on IMAX.
Oh yeah, it was all film?
Yeah, it was all film. So
okay.
you're kind of seeing the whole frame, but it's a thing James Cameron kind of famously used a lot. I mean, loads of films are shot on Super 35 because it's easier for CGI to be implemented. Doing anamorphically is a bit more difficult. Nolan shoots anamorphically, that's why they look great in 4K. Super 35, when you sort of crop it for widescreen, you end up with more grain. He wanted the vertical height to sort of fill the IMAX format. It's a shame he didn't shoot on IMAX because the footage would look even better.
Certain scenes were shot in IMAX, but obviously not the whole thing.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, most people won't see it in like the IMAX format because of the current state, and also that this is made for streaming. The thing with the whole format, because when I heard about this, I was like, this was obviously not the original plan. This is something that Snyder commanded because he had more control over this one now. It reeks of this fake pretentiousness of this format, like those very, very important artist films are shot in this kind of format. My film, this big magnum opus, this is gonna have this format as well. This is the stuff, I think, that's really the reason.
It is worth noting, just to interject, that Batman v Superman has also now been re-released in 4:3.
Yeah. But it's continuity though. Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, all 2:35:1 aspect ratio. Then they go to full frame or 1:8:5:1 theatrically for the film. To me, at the time, I just thought, they're just copying Avengers because Avengers did the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
The other film was in scope, then this is in flat.
If you look at Justice League, most of it is shot, the Snyder cut, with a lot of headroom. And that gives you the inclination. Like when you shoot for IMAX, you have people so close to the screen that you can't fill the entire screen with important information. You look at Nolan, you look at what Brad Bird did with Mission Impossible, like any filmmaker's done IMAX, all the important information is on the horizon, is close to the center of the frame. And the tops and bottoms of the frame, because people are so damn close to this giant screen, is mostly with peripheral expanded viewpoint. That's the main purpose of IMAX, is to have this screen that fills up your entire viewpoint. But when it does that, you can't look at everything. So they're more there for the immersion, not for that important visual information. But even most of the Snyder cut is framed that way. So you could easily crop in for 90% of these shots and not lose their essence. This movie was clearly shot with the intention that it would be shown in IMAX in 4:3 for the entire duration. But if you saw it in like a regular theater, it would probably be in 1:8:5:1. And same thing for home release.
Yeah, it still would have been cropped slightly for IMAX because IMAX isn't exactly 1:33. I think it's like 1:37 or something like that.
It's 1:43, I think.
Well, especially if you're watching it in a fake IMAX screen, because a lot of IMAX screens aren't actually 4:3, I can tell you that now.
The Limax, isn't it? Yeah.
No, for sure. Like the proper IMAX.
The funny thing is, because like filmmakers like Nolan and David Lynch, and I think also like Zack Snyder, they're really vocal about the cinematic experience.
Yeah.
You're supposed to watch these movies on the big screen in the theater, and funny enough, whether he realizes it or not, doing this 4:3 version, Snyder accidentally made like the perfect version to watch on your phone.
I know. We could start a new hashtag saying like bring back pan and scan, aren't they? What's wrong with you?
Ironically, it wouldn't be very good on my phone because my phone is very narrow, so it's actually got a 21:9 aspect ratio, so actually my phone is more suited for the original version of Batman v Superman.
It's so obvious, like when they pan out for the big hero shot, it takes so long until you finally see all of them on screen at the same time.
It's these films shot on Super 35 and Justice League is, but they crop it because of artistic reasons to make it look, more cinematic.
Yeah, it was kind of off-putting, and from the very start I was like, oh no, I kind of got used to it after a while. I mean, I didn't really realize it because there was enough other stuff I had to pay attention to, but it doesn't really look cinematic. This is fine for something like The Lighthouse, which is supposed to have this claustrophobic feeling.
That works. That works wonderfully, doesn't it?
But for this big CGI-filled, crowd-pleasing blockbuster this is supposed to be, the format really does it a disservice, I think.
I don't think it lends itself to it that well.
Yeah.
I was surprised by the huge amount of CGI when there's no miniatures or anything like that. Not much in-camera stuff. It's very CG heavy, but they've done a good job with restoring scenes because Steppenwolf looks brilliant throughout. I think the only thing we sort of touched upon in looking bad is Martian Manhunter. Everything else kind of looked pretty good. The nightmare sequence, Cyborg looks a bit not as crisp as he should.
I think Cyborg's a bit wobbly, but he was a bit wobbly in the previous version. One of the other things that I don't think this cut improves, the climax of the movie still feels like a big CG smash 'em up.
And it's all dark as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's very common to a lot of superhero movies. I think it's exacerbated by the fact that it's obviously CGI sets and everything. It doesn't feel like a real tangible place that they're actually in. Of course, that was the same in the other version, albeit with an expanded problem of the color grade. You can sort of see where Warner Brothers was coming from with the studio notes of maybe we should add some people here to add some legitimate human threat in.
Yeah, not the way they did.
The Whedon inserts of the family that are just absolutely terrible and jarring, and like, why are people living here? That makes no sense. But, you can kind of see the thought behind it.
Because the theatrical cut had a major problem of the world feeling so empty, because obviously, you're commenting on throwing in this extra family they have to save. It's a nice little touch, I suppose, with Superman kind of lifting the entire building to save everyone.
Yeah.
In this version, I didn't get a sense that the world felt empty.
No, I actually did. Aside from the Flash introduction scene where we actually have to deal with normal people.
Yeah.
Everything else, it mostly just contains the main characters, like aside from, of course, like the Amazonian scenes.
That is true, yeah. But it felt less empty to me. It felt less empty this time around.
Just a tiny bit. They established, like, the relationship between Lois and the cop.
Yeah, I liked that.
Mark McClure. It's Jimmy Olsen from the original films, which was quite cool.
I
really?
didn't know that. A hidden cameo. That's nice. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
The Jimmy Olsen in this universe just got shot in the face in Batman v Superman.
That's totally nice. But I didn't get the feeling of, like, because the climax now that you have removed the human element, which was added clunkily for sure in the Whedon version.
Sure, yeah.
Now it just feels so disconnected from everything. I actually think in these kind of superhero movies, you kind of need that human element of, like, people needing being saved, like in the Raimi Spider-Man films and stuff like that.
They could have deployed more sort of news coverage and things like that. That's why they often use that as a quick way to sort of expand things. It's a bit contrived, but it would have worked.
To be fair, Batman v Superman did that the worst possible way with Anderson.
Yeah.
I still hate that. Like, oh my god, you just don't do that ever again.
It's totally empty. It's like Dragon Ball Z style. I can see their parachutes. They're okay.
Everyone's been teleported to safety. But that's an interesting thing as well, because the ending of Batman v Superman, with him dying, the whole film's made a point that the people were very kind of split on Superman, and a lot of people didn't like him, they were scared of him, and then once he was dead, they're like, oh my god, he's dead.
I kind of felt like it was the Michael Jackson effect of once they're dead, people actually, oh yeah, they kind of were interested. Like,
Yeah, perhaps. That was the kind of problem.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Superman should have died like 3 or 4 films down the road where you've got that emotional punch right at the end when he dies. You think, oh my god. But I didn't care anything. I was so angry when he died in Batman vs Superman because it was so undeserved.
Yeah, it was so abrupt.
Yeah.
So undeserved.
It was extremely undeserved, and also which Batman's motivation still doesn't make much sense.
Yeah.
In the Whedon version, it's also kind of weird how they established, oh, now the world is shitty because Superman is gone, where it's, no, he didn't really help matters much.
No, he didn't.
It was shitty beforehand, too.
He didn't really do all that much to make the world a better place. It was still kind of awful. And in this one, it's still like, now we have to assemble a team. It still kind of comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, it's still a very weak excuse to kickstart it, I think.
One of my biggest issues with Man of Steel back in the day was that, like, those aliens would not have come unless Superman instigated them. It's this weird, like, thing with Man of Steel. Like, they would have never come to Earth unless Superman was exploring the ships.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
It's worth talking about the two very different conceptions of Superman in the two cuts. I feel like Henry Cavill was actually kind of wasted across these 3 films. I feel like in Man of Steel, he shows a lot of promise as Superman.
He's been amazing throughout this entire series. I've never had an issue with his performance.
I feel like he's a good Superman in movies that don't really have much purpose for Superman. It's telling that in the theatrical cut of Batman v Superman, they cut out most of his scenes and dialogue, and so he only has, about 23 lines in a 2.5-hour movie or so?
Where he's the title character,
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
In Justice League, I would argue that he has almost about a similar amount of screen time as he does in Batman v Superman.
Yeah, true.
When he revives, he still doesn't speak very much. Snyder's conception of Superman is very solemn, very much weighted down by his responsibility to the world, and there is an interesting take on that. I feel like some people take criticism of Snyder's Superman as, oh, you want the sort of classic golden era Superman, you want the Christopher Reeve Superman. I go, not necessarily. There is an argument to be said for a Superman that reflects a modern conflicted world. I don't think that Snyder executes it very well because this Superman is so internalized and so cut off from the rest of the world. It feels like he doesn't want to save the world. It feels often quite begrudging. And if nothing else about those reshoots, even though it's a portrayal of Snyder's intent, it,
Yeah.
there is still more of that classic feeling of Superman, and it gave Cavill something to do. I feel like it gave Cavill a chance to actually be Superman in a way that he was not allowed to in the Snyder version of Justice League and the movie before it.
I think with Superman, it's like the more you sort of deviate away from the classic architecture of him, it no longer becomes Superman. That's the thing. Batman can be interpreted in many different ways, and it's actually done quite successfully. He can be campy, he can be dark, he can be kind of all various degrees of things. But Superman, and once you take a few elements away to sort of interpret him in a different version, it doesn't feel like Superman.
It's often been said that Snyder's dark take on superheroes is very much influenced by Watchmen, which is certainly a thing that I can see, because I would argue that his Superman is basically a reskinned Dr. Manhattan.
Oh yeah, he's Batman's Night Owl. As soon as he wears those goggles, I was like, that's fucking Night Owl.
With Rorschach's prejudice.
The funny thing is, when I watched that nightmare scene in Batman v Superman, and you see like Batman like with a gargoyles and a trench coat, and I was like, this looks like Kevin Smith dressed as Batman and more rats.
yeah. Why is he wearing the mask still? He doesn't need to wear it anymore. You know, he's just got a gun. He's fine. You know.
I think the problem with some of these DC heroes, and Superman in particular, is that they are so iconic that they kind of are a victim to their own success and recognizability in a way, where it's like everybody knows who these characters are and how they are supposed to act in a certain way, at least. And so, of course, dividing from that kind of becomes alienating to some people. Of course, you can make some changes, you could make maybe some improvements also, but I think that's something the MCU was always lucky about, because they dealt with heroes which hadn't been depicted all that much in the past. Like, I mean, they started with Iron Man, a character nobody gave a damn about basically from the start. Like, he was like a side character in that universe, and they just established him as they pleased, and nobody really had an issue with it because he was barely known in the common world. With these DC movies, because they are so pre-established and you have seen so many versions of them which were roughly the same, it's difficult when you have something that's that different.
Yeah, it's true. Very true.
They went for deconstruction before they even laid out the foundation to deconstruct.
Yeah. One of my issues with Snyder's conception of it is that for something that's supposed to set up a cinematic universe, it feels like it's already at the end game.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah.
You set up Batman as being burnt out, he's lost Robin and everything, and you go, well, where is he to go? You've established him at his most fascist vigilante. Like, where is the character going to go from there?
Yeah, that's been his problem.
That's absolutely true. I mean, you can do that as like this kind of like surprise element, basically, because like I said, we have seen so many other Batman movies, so seeing him in this different interpretation, but also at his low point in this state, it could work. In some points, it even does work in Batman v Superman, but not all the way through. But yeah, you're totally right. Like, there's nowhere to go but up from here. And it's still like has changed to now I am a team-working man, and now I have to bring the Justice League together, and it still comes out of nowhere and doesn't really fit.
We haven't talked about the best character in this movie, and that's Alfred.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if he's the best character in this movie, but I did enjoy Jeremy Irons as Alfred. He's good value.
He is so good in this movie. He's so good.
He gets, a lot more screen time, which is great, even though he makes a cup of tea wrong. To me, in a way. He puts the hot water in first. I was like, no, you don't do that. Yeah, good seeing that dynamic again, and more scenes with Bruce and Alfred just sort of disagreeing or just sort of not seeing eye to eye completely was a nice moment.
Yeah.
And sort of this gives more Bruce screen time to sort of dwell on his thoughts or to sort of try and compute everything and not just be like Batman and being growly. I'm not a big fan of the sort of growly voice they use in this version.
Yeah, it's very processed.
Yeah, I just like him when he's talking normally, so I think that kind of works in its favour.
Because it's a weird thing, because like obviously the worst voice for Batman has been the Dark Knight ones. I love those movies, but whatever the hell Nolan and Christian Bale did was not working. And so when they first did Batman v Superman and he had that voice modulator, I thought it was really cool, but it almost like it took away a lot of what Ben Affleck was adding to the role. Like, you could tell he was making a joke or saying something interesting, but the voice would just drop it of that sort of punctuation.
Yeah, definitely.
So like in this movie, it was a bit overused. It's one of those things of like the verisimilitude of this universe where it's like, it doesn't make sense that Clark Kent just puts glasses on and is able to not get recognized, but you can't just buy it for the sake of the world. And I think in this case, just have him sound like Ben Affleck. I don't think there's any problem.
Yeah, have him sound like a normal person as opposed to a computer trying to turn someone's voice into gravel. I think that would help a lot.
Oh, totally.
Let's talk about Cyborg, because we've been putting off so long.
Because he was the best stuff of the movie, easily.
Ray Fisher has obviously been the most vocal about wanting to get the Snyder Cut out, because obviously he was discriminated against by Joss Whedon. And believe me, comparing the two cuts, that is extremely borne out. It's pretty clear that Whedon gutted his his role in the theatrical version and undermined him at virtually every turn and turned him into a stereotypical black sidekick at times, even saying things like booyah in inserts, or the bit where he goes, I can't feel my toes. I'm like,
doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
The most substantial changes are to do with Cyborg, who finally gets a proper backstory and establishment. I still feel like it's a bit rushed in this version. Like, they established that he's the football champion, and then he has that conversation with his mum in the car, and then immediately after she says the line of something like, you have a bright future ahead of you, car crash.
Yeah.
That's a bit on the nose.
It also bugs me when it's like characters in a car. The mother's at fault because she's looking at her son when she's at the wheel, when no, your eyes are supposed to be forward, so your peripheral vision's working. I'm sorry, she's responsible for that car accident. She should have seen that freaking car coming. It bugs the crap out of me in movies when people are not driving responsibly.
It always bugs me when you get the immediate side angle of someone sat in a car because you know that someone's going to crash into them and T-bone them.
Oh, yeah.
But it was a good moment with him, crying, and she sort of turns his head. I thought it was a great moment. Then obviously it's kind of punctuated with a car crash.
Yeah.
It is kind of a bit horrific when he's sort of seeing him strapped to the thing and he's just got his torso there. That's it.
Yeah.
But I think how it plays into his relationship with his father was really a sort of motivating point for his character, and it's definitely the strongest emotional core to the movie. That is for me.
Oh yeah, Joe Morton's fantastic in this film. I detected a lot of homages to Terminator 2 here.
Oh yes.
Another movie that had multiple edits. So Joe Morton is essentially just playing Miles Dyson again here.
Pretty much. Yeah.
I don't have a problem with that because Joe Morton's great.
And he dies in this version, which he did not in the theatrical.
Yeah, that's a big change. Again, this is one of the things that Whedon inexplicably gutted, because there's so much key exposition in this subplot. In the theatrical version, I don't think it's even clear where the mother box is. They cut so much out.
Oh, we left it in a car and Steppenwolf came and got it. We don't even see Steppenwolf. That's an embarrassing moment.
Yeah, well, even before that point, I think they barely even established that Cyborg's got it, whereas it's clearly laid out right from the start here that Cyborg's got that.
Oh, was it not in the apartment in the theatrical cut?
It is, but it's only very vaguely alluded to. And then Cyborg has that weird bit in the harbour where he dives out to go and grab it.
Right, yeah.
And in the theatrical version, you go, why is he doing that? And in the Snyder cut, it's because he's chosen to bury it at his mother's grave in one of those editions that, again, made me go, wait, what?
Yeah.
In a movie that already has them digging up Superman's grave, I go, why do we need more grave digging?
It's all a metaphor.
Yeah, and also Snyder has an obsession with funerals and graves in his movies.
It's strange. Probably would have left that out of the theatrical version. It's not really a plot point that goes anywhere. But it's strange because in the theatrical version of Justice League, all the stuff at Star Labs is virtually deleted. And so that side of the plot doesn't make any sense. In the theatrical version, Steppenwolf is just abducting random people to find the mother box. You go, why? And in the Snyder cut, it's because they work at Star Labs, where the box was.
Yeah, because it's all about the terror demons, whatever. They can sort of smell the mother boxes on these people.
Yeah, the parademons can smell that, yeah.
But also with Cyborg, we are shown how powerful he is. Obviously, it goes into sort of this other world, isn't it, into his mind, where he's kind of got his legs and he's in his kind of football jacket.
A sort of mind palace, yeah.
Yeah, and he gives that lady that money.
That was the best scene in the movie.
That was really good. I love that moment.
I would have liked that scene a little bit more if he didn't look so sinister.
Have the money.
I got the intent, which was nice, but we should have showed a little bit more, showing a few more people he helped in that way. What I really had a problem with concerning his origin was that just basically the point of his father was I'm gonna bring you back to life and I'm gonna turn you into this supercomputer with this huge amount of responsibility
and power.
Yeah, and power, which could be totally used the wrong way.
Yeah, Joe Morton's scientist is probably the most amoral scientist in the history of the planet. Here is this incredible godlike power. Don't abuse it, son. It's a little bit too much.
I think that's why the Cyborg stuff so interesting is that his character who did not want this power is thrust into it and resents his father for that. He's in his opinion, he'd rather died in an accident.
Yeah.
But then to connect again with his father only for him to sacrifice his life. This is origin story stuff that works so well. I like the idea of having this great origin story within this bigger team movie.
Yeah.
It reminds me a lot of the Hulk stuff in Avengers.
It's for the most part pretty well integrated, as good as they could, basically.
I do think the Mind Palace stuff occasionally gets a little bit goofy in that introduction scene where they visualize the metaphor of Wall Street.
Yeah, that was funny.
That was really goofy.
That was so stupid. And also the way they described how the mother box basically got where it is now, and then it just very, very briefly, then the Nazis discovered it, and I was like, wait, what?
Yeah, but like, why do we need Nazis?
Is this an Indiana Jones movie we completely
Yeah.
missed or something? Indiana Jones and the mother box of Doomsday.
Which is really hilarious because the flashback with the mother boxes, and then like the Atlanteans and the Amazonians and then the humans, each of them have one. The humans, basically, they just dig a hole that's not even like 2 meters deep, and they just put it in there with no guards. And I was like, this might be actually a reshoot. But no, it's actually also in this one. And it's so comical.
And yet that's the one that never gets found. I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah, until the Nazis dig it up, I guess.
I think that while initially the Mind Palace stuff registered as goofy, it does have some real emotional resonance, particularly in the climax of the movie, where a lot of it is internalized in Cyborg's head. The sequence where Cyborg's father dies, he sacrifices his life, is so much better than the theatrical version. Those storylines are intersecting around Superman's revival, because in the theatrical version it's cut down so choppily. You have Lois arriving there in the Snyder Cut, who just happens to be there. In the theatrical version, it's recontextualized.
Batman, brought her. Yeah, I remember that.
She's Bruce's secret weapon, which again turns it into a prop.
That's a lame payoff, though. That was a lame scene in the theatrical.
It reduces her agency.
I actually liked it more because it was happening at the Superman Memorial, so it makes complete sense that Lois would be there.
They establish it well in this one.
And then, of course, you've got the Star Labs employees who are all cut out with the theatrical version. That's another side of the plot that needed to be there as key relevant information. In the theatrical version, it's reduced into a nonsense where it just lands on a police car and everyone forgets about it, and to some extent still happens in the Snyder Cut, but at least there's a whole set of characters that saw that happen, and then it motivates him to grab the box.
And they pay off the laser thing they were doing, and yeah, I was really well done.
Again, setup, payoff. Coherent storytelling.
What?
That's what happens when you have like a bunch of studio executives sitting there, like you have to cut this down to 2 hours, be ruthless, go, and this is the result.
The stuff with Cyborg is easily the heart of the movie. I don't know if the movie has much of a coherent theme, but I would argue that it eventually manages to find one about 3 hours into it with Cyborg's plot line. Again, nodding back to Terminator 2, the future is not set.
Yeah, with Flash and that.
Cyborg learns to embrace who he is, not who he was, but who he is now. And I think that as a broader theme, I think that Justice League could be argued as being the ability to atone for past mistakes, to not be defined by our faults in the past. And I think that that does come across, and there's certainly an added poignancy because the literal existence of this cut is an example of that.
It's his resurrection, like, it's very literal.
And doing it back over, in Justice League in both versions is a world where not even death cannot be undone. There is definitely something quite emotional about that gives this cut a lot of heft. But I think you also, to some extent, see that in Barry's contribution to the climax, where, again, for all the people that claim that Snyder is going against the traditional Superman mythos, well, what does he end his movie on?
Rewinding time, yeah.
A big homage to Superman the movie.
I think this climax still has a few issues, but that 5-minute section or so of Flash rewinding time leading to Cyborg taking apart the boxes is some of the best filmmaking of Snyder's entire career.
Yeah.
That stuff was powerful. It was the best sort of action serving the characters. The way they visualized Flash rewinding time was so unbelievably cool and got me.
Yeah, it worked. Very cosmic as well.
Yeah.
Man of Steel was very sort of trying to ground itself in some sort of reality with its filmmaking.
Yeah.
By Justice League, it was embracing the comic book stuff that we all kind of want to see.
And there are big stakes here as well, because all the Justice League members die apart from the Flash.
Yeah.
You can see all their skeletons reconstructing.
Yeah.
So technically Superman dies twice in this movie.
Yeah, it's also quite the Watchmen moment. And it's also something, I think you said that in your Transformers 2 review, where it's like a fangasm moment of a different kind, where you're just you see the heroes failing, but not with much consequence.
I think that ultimately this is a superior version to the movie that we got. I don't think it's a perfect one by any stretch, and I think that some of the issues that I had with the original version of it, they aren't going away. Those were things that were pre-baked in. However, I do think that this is a far better movie than Batman v Superman, and honestly, if they went through with this cut, I think it probably would have been more successful, honestly, in terms of reception.
Well, I think a potential $1 billion hit if they got this thing down to 3 hours. Like, it could have been a massive success.
I don't know if I would go that far, because the thing about Batman v Superman, I think a lot of people felt burnt by that movie.
Yeah.
So I think that whatever happened, Justice League was going to feel that impact in some way, but I think that a better movie overall would have caught word of mouth.
I think by that point, Batman vs Superman divided audiences, and people that loved Snyder's vision would have all poured in to see Justice League, and it would have made maybe kind of the same amount of money, or maybe a little bit more.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, maybe like on par with Batman v Superman.
Yeah.
But like also with these superhero movies, like even with DC, like Aquaman made 1.1 billion. Wonder Woman was a massive success. It's clear that if you make a big crowd-pleasing movie, audiences show up.
Yeah.
I think this movie, like, I like this more than Aquaman, that's for sure.
Oh, I was never a fan of Aquaman, and I didn't like it when it came out. People were like, what? It's amazing!
I love the visuals of Aquaman and the action scenes.
A few months later, people were like, it is a bit of a shit movie. I liked Wonder Woman 84, and everyone went apeshit.
I did not like Wonder Woman 84.
No, I was not.
There's problems with it, but I saw it on the big screen, and it kind of worked. And I think there is that argument, a film can work, sometimes work better on a big screen than experiencing on the small screen. I think Wonder Woman played into that. For me, it was quite a good experience on a large screen, but everyone who obviously saw it in mass numbers was on HBO Max or whatever.
The thing is, with these two cuts, you can't blame Snyder all the way through, and you can't blame Whedon.
You can't blame Kevin Tsujihara, though.
Yeah.
Who you have to blame is Warner Bros. Themselves. We're just like spineless, contradicting their choices, and not knowing what to do.
Yeah.
Acting very, very cowardly. I actually think because the early rumors of like the 4-hour work print or 5-hour work print, whatever, of Justice League they called it a disaster. But this is basically, the work print is basically what we got here, just with finished effects. And it's not really a disaster.
No.
There's a workable movie in here. It needs refinement, but there's a workable movie.
Yeah, that's the thing. You need editors to bring in and kind of structure it in a way. And they could have done it with the existing material, which is really, really weird why they just blew another $100 million or something for those reshoots, which were, for the most part, really, really useless.
Yeah.
It strikes me as cowardly studio executives who don't know what they want except the things which worked. And they were like, okay, now we have this guy, make Avengers again, because that's what worked. And then you have like this Frankenstein's monster of a thing, which doesn't please anybody really. I'm really bewildered by how this got so out of hand and caused so much bad blood, bad press, and years of toxic fandom. That's another thing I want to say. This cut, this wouldn't exist without the pandemic, I think.
No, not at all.
This was a case of everything shut down, all of the production shut down, and then pretty fast after like the pandemic broke out,
It's like April or so.
Warner Bros. I think must have said, hey, we have basically this work print sitting on our shelves. Now we have the chance to finish it, and it won't cost that much money comparatively. And without the pandemic, I'm pretty convinced this still would sit on a shelf.
Roughly around that same time, they were saying, oh, we found this longer cut of Batman Forever.
Yeah.
There was this kind of in their eyes, oh, we can just go to the archive and just re-release stuff.
Yeah.
To me, as a film fan, fuck yeah, great. I'd watch it.
I'd love to see that.
I want to see that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you kind of summed it up nicely, really. It's just a studio just in chaos, and you've got people in power who aren't filmmakers, but just money men, and that's what they saw.
And a lot of them are gone now. Like, a lot of the people that made those decisions.
They've been booted, yeah.
Just like with Batman and Robin.
Yeah.
Exactly. You commissioned this? It's like...
A lot of visual effects studios apparently were on the brink of going bankrupt with, pandemic and that. And that this movie, for a lot of them, was like the sole reason they were able to keep afloat.
That's great.
Yeah, that's like the power of filmmaking.
Yeah.
And also in the last couple of years, streaming really got out of hand in a way how it evolved in terms of content. Now is really dominant in how we watch and consume media.
Disney Plus was a real turning point.
Oh, yeah. And I think that is also one of the reasons why they released the film in this 4-hour version, because that also wouldn't have been possible back then in 2017.
It's not far off from the 6-hour runtime of Mandalorian, like any season of that show.
The initial plans of them were like, we are releasing it in 4 chunks over several weeks. That might have worked as well, maybe. I'm not quite sure.
I think it was smart to do it the way they did it, yeah.
The way they divided it into chapters, and it's kind of meant that way to maybe pause it every now and then. These are the chapter marks, basically. But yeah, this is really a result of both the pandemic and the evolution of streaming coming together and making it possible that this version even exists. And it wasn't the toxic fan base which wished it into existence. It was those circumstances. But the toxic fan base thinks that they have won with this. That's the part that irks me about this the most.
One final point I found was so interesting about this trilogy is if you look at it spaced out over 8 years, it kind of charts the whole evolution of big budget filmmaking. That like Man of Steel 2013, clearly a Dark Knight inspired narrative, or Batman Begins if it were, but of that Nolan era. And then you get to Batman v Superman, and that's very much DC trying to catch up to Marvel, doing the Civil War in the same year as Civil War, embracing, but not to that full success, that cinematic universe sort of storytelling. And then this is like an off-canon sort of streaming event. And it's how it's like, if you look at these three movies, you can chart the evolution of where we've gone in the past 8 years and just how much things have changed.
I feel like we kind of got the best outcome possibly out of all this, because I don't know how things would have fared had we continued down this road of the Snyder stuff, kind of building up to things like Injustice and things like that. I don't know if audiences genuinely would have been on board with something like that. And I think that DC now is far more interesting because they're doing solo films that aren't necessarily tied to a big game plan in the way that Marvel does. They've set themselves apart in that way.
A loose cannon, which I think is a very smart choice.
Yeah, I really like that.
If this kind of trilogy hadn't, I guess, for lack of a better term, failed or underperformed, you wouldn't have movies like Joker. Now, I'm not saying that I'm a fan of Joker,
but a lot of people love that movie.
You know, you wouldn't have got a movie like that made that kind of independent risk unless you had these kind of circumstances.
Or like Birds of Prey.
Exactly. The very individualistic films rather than trying to force them into a template.
Yeah.
I actually really like it because whenever a studio tries to do what the MCU is doing, they fail. I mean, I don't have to point at Universal and their attempt with
Dark
the Dark Universe.
Oh, I still love that tweet.
That was embarrassing, wasn't it?
Such an embarrassing joke, but how they're doing it now, and I don't know if they are now actually set with that plan, continuing it with like these just loosely connected movies, just doing whatever they want with certain characters or properties. If they continue with this, I would be totally fine, because that would be a unique approach. Basically just like, here's another interpretation of a Joker, here's another interpretation of Batman, and this is like a loose Harley Quinn sequel, maybe? I don't know, have it, you know? And I'm like, okay, no, this is perfectly fine. Not everything has to be connected.
It's trail mix, you know, you just pick the ones you like.
Exactly. It's really easy. Now you don't have to pretend, oh, this is not canon, this is not my whatever. You don't have to do that anymore.
Fans take that stuff way too seriously.
Yeah.
It's like, it's all made up. They're going to do the Spider-Man movie where like they're going to have the 3 different Spider-Man in it. It doesn't matter because it's all nonsense anyway.
I suppose to sort of sum up my thoughts, really, it's like, yeah, I think we've all sort of pointed out sort of pros and cons, but it is a movie that totally surprised me, and I definitely will watch it again. I think it will be one of those, like Lord of the Rings, I watch every year, the extended versions, and Justice League may sort of fit into that. It's not something I can rush back to, you know, watching like in another month or two, but I think as a yearly thing or every couple of years, it's something I would happily sit through again. Where the theatrical cut, I was like, no, I'm not going to bother watching that again. Even Batman vs Superman, I can't be bothered to watch again. I thought to myself, maybe I should prep myself and rewatch these movies, you know, before Justice League. But I thought, nah, I'm just going to rely on my memory to sort of get myself through this.
I will say that in hindsight, because Batman v Superman put so much of the framework in place, Batman v Superman is very much despair, whereas this is kind of a redemptive hope.
Yeah.
I feel like they kind of go together in that way. Not to defend Batman v Superman, which I still think is one of the most slog-like big-budget studio tentpoles in recent memory.
Have the same filmmaker be on board and make a sequel to a bad movie. I think it's one of the best versions of that. Like most filmmakers, like whether it be a Peter Jackson or George Lucas, where they get worse with time. I guess this is comparable to like Attack of the Clones does lead into Revenge of the Sith, and I like Revenge of the Sith, but I'm not watching that again.
Yeah, that's the same situation I'm in. Yeah. No, I'm not going to watch that again.
I'm kind of on the opposite. This new cut was basically what I expected.
Sure.
It's basically, you know, the same story. It's just restructured. It has a lot of baggage. It's very, very bloated, and it has a lot of the stuff I just don't enjoy about Zack Snyder's movies, even though it is a little bit lighter in tone, even though there were individual moments I liked, which were also the case with Man of Steel and Batman v Superman. There were individual scenes in those I kind of enjoyed. If I had to choose which version I would rewatch, I think like the 2017 cut, at least to me, it's watchable in this kind of like schlocky way. It turns into a cartoon at several points. It's so clunky with the stuff it's trying to fix and set up. up.
Yeah.
At least it has a very, very enjoyable score. I could maybe watch that again. I don't think I would watch the Snyder Cut again.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
I think it is the length. The length is the problem that would put people off rewatching it. I think that my answer would be I would watch this again if someone came through and made a fan edit that was 2.5 hours to 3 hours long.
Well, that'd be interesting. That'd be interesting if the fans can make something that's, shorter and it works even better. That'd be pretty incredible to see.
I feel like this cut, it's an assembly cut.
Yeah.
You can see a movie in here that would work, but you've got to tough through it a lot of the time. You got to really put the effort in to get to that stuff. But it's rewarding when you get to it. But even when I'm watching this, I'm going, it would never have been a great movie. It would have been a decent one, but it wouldn't have been a great one.
It would have made up for Batman vs Superman, put it that way.
Another funny thing I had been thinking about is if this cut or a similar cut to this, like maybe like a 3-hour version of this, had come out in 2017, it would have predated Infinity War and Endgame. It would have come out in a different climate, in a way, where we hadn't seen this kind of superhero team-up payoff yet. We only had 2 Avengers movies, but like Infinity War and Endgame really were like those big payoffs. And now, having seen those movies, this film kind of feels redundant in a way.
Feels a lot like Endgame, especially.
Yeah, it's different characters for sure, but it shares like similar things. Of course, I mean, you can also only do so much with this type of plot and setup and the superheroes and all of that. But I think it would have hit differently if we hadn't seen comparative movies from the MCU at that point.
Yeah.
Like when Infinity War came out, people argued that Marvel finally did dark and gritty just as better than DC, and it's almost like that in a way. Like Marvel beat them to that punch.
I would argue that those 2 movies maybe almost primed the pump for this. This movie probably gets a better reception now that we're familiar with that kind of storytelling than we probably would have been back in 2017, arguably.
No, I think I agree.
Maybe? I don't know.
If Warner Brothers didn't put all their eggs in one basket straight away, they could have continued on with their sort of standalone movies, and then once Endgame had finished, because obviously it feels like, all the superhero films have come to an end, but Warner Brothers could have still been in the background doing their own thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And led up to this big team-up movie. So they're just trying to get to the finish line so quickly. And that's what's kind of shot themselves in the foot and had to sort of restart again. So back to the beginning for you. Come on.
In some different parallel dimension, this is what happened. And maybe someday a person from that dimension will cross over and show us what their world looks like now.
But they'll be too late. They'll be too early.
It will be Flash coming through. I'm too early!
Nicolas Cage is still Superman.
That's a universe I'd like to see.
Oh, God.
Amy Adams is the key.
Oh, that would be amazing.
What I will say is that I hope, for Zack's sake, that finishing this cut has found him some kind of closure in this horrible mess.
Yeah, definitely.
And I hope that it brings a closure to this whole saga, to be honest. I think that it's been 4 years now. I think we can pretty much close the book on this, almost, really. We've got the cut now. We can make the comparisons for ourselves. I feel like at this point, this chapter's over, and it would be probably wise if we moved on to something else now.
I think so, yeah.
That would be nice. Some fans won't let this go. I mean, I've already seen like those hashtags restore the Snyderverse, and I'm like, no. I mean, it depends on what happens with this cut financially, but I doubt that they will like dig up all of those plans again and they just continue with whatever they want to do.
Yeah.
I just hope those people can now happily ever after live with this cut and just leave the rest of us alone.
Yeah. I feel like this is a tantalizing what if, which is what it originated as, but even so, I think that now that we have something at the end of it, we can call it a day. And on that note, Oliver, where can people find you?
Well, all you got to do is put in my name into YouTube, Oliver Harper, and you'll find my retrospective reviews channel.
Jonathan, where can people find you?
On YouTube at Films and Stuff. I swear new content's coming. And on Twitter at JBURD22.
Lasse, where can people find you?
You can find me on Facebook and Twitter at Lasse Vogt. My own podcast is called Fans About Films. You can find it on SoundCloud and iTunes. I co-host It's a 90s Christmas podcast with Lyle Perez, and I'm also a part of the German podcast collective Telestammtisch, where we discuss all the new releases, and I also have a soundtrack blog, scoregeek.wordpress.com. Also a YouTube channel, The Deppard. I do a lot of stuff online, and I hope you check it out. I had a blast being here again.
Oh, thank you. I hope you've all had a blast as well. You can find me, Film Brain, on YouTube, obviously. You can also find the podcast on all the major platforms. Search the Film Brain podcast. I'm on Twitter at FB_BMB. Film Brain Reviews on Facebook. I'm also on Tumblr as, I forget now. Let me check. I am FilmBrainBMB on Tumblr as well. I have a letterboxd page, film_brain. I am also FilmBrainBMB on Instagram as well, because apparently I need to have that. You can find me on Patreon at patreon.com/filmbrain. This is getting way too long.
What about Yellow Pages?
I'm everywhere.
Cyborg.
Indeed. And on that note, I'm Matthew Buck, fading out. Take care, everyone. Thank you for listening to the Film Brain podcast. Hope you enjoyed it. Just a reminder that if you want to support my work, be it podcasts or YouTube videos, please go to my Patreon at patreon.com/filmbrain, where you can experience those episodes early, among other perks. And just a quick shout out to my Patreons, Tim Poppleton, G Viral, Henry Jacob, Jonah Gustafson, Harry Baker, Vincent Chiang, Ina Civic, Jake McNulty, Colin M. Cherry, Isa Thelios, Tom Oliver Maddox. And remember, if you have any feedback about the show over social media, please use the hashtag FilmBrainPodcast.